I stopped by a pawn shop the other day and they had a guitar on there on sale because it was missing a couple of strings. And that means that it's hard for some people to do that. And I don't think the real difficulty is what's going on at this end of the guitar. I think it's what's going on at this end of the guitar. So here you go. This is the best way to change guitar strings. Before we can talk about the best way to tune a guitar, we got to talk about the different types of tuners that you can use. So here is a Fender locking tuner. They've got these little locking heads at the bottom here. Each one of these is a pin that screws up into the neck or into the tuner head, and then if you can see in the holes there, you've got there's little pins that pinch the string inside. Now, those are the more expensive type of tuners. Moving on to one of my recent favorites are these Cluson style tuners. Now these things have the little hole that goes down inside, and you just push the spare end of the string down into that hole and then start winding. You don't have any way of pinching the string, but it's you get enough winds on there. You got sufficient friction, and you also don't have that spare end poking in the fingers. And then here's your sort of bog standard style tuners, and these ones, I've got the little string bit sticking out. I'm going to show you my favorite way of winding these, and I'll also point out that on my low E string, I don't know why this thing won't refocus, but anyway, on the low E string you can see that it's there we go, wrapping over, whereas on this string here it's wrapping underneath, and that's the way I do all my strings. But in this one, I just I didn't negatively affect the break angle of the low E string, so it seems. So it's still sufficient to get good contact and to not buzz like a sitar. But this way, when I've got the string wrapping under like that, I'm still pinching the string, and it's still maintaining tension because the string, these shafts taper towards the top there. So anyway, let's look at my little string tuning rig. I'll give you a better example and demonstration on the best way to wrap guitar strings for tuning stability. Alright, this rig I made out of a cereal box and a couple of paper tubes. Well, two halves of the same paper tube. And I'm going to use, this is sort of a nylon boat rope to simulate guitar strings. Do this to demonstrate the best way of winding guitars, winding the strings on as you're changing them when you're using one of a variety of different kinds of tuners. I don't have one here that simulates the locking process of what locking tuners are capable of, but I can simulate it well enough with this one. This is my Cluson style one. So first off, we're going to do the locking tuner style, and what you would get, very similar to the way Cluson would work, except it doesn't have this open gap. But you would put the string in and then sort of activate the locking pin from underneath, and it squeezes the string from underneath against this upper, the end of where it's drilled out from underneath. And I'll just get this part of the string out of the way, and then as you tighten it up, when it's pinched like that, you only have to tune it part way. Now, in my experience, this is always where the string was breaking for me, and when the string breaks and you've got absolutely no slack left, you're sunk. You have to change that string, even if you just put it on. You don't have to have a whole lot on here, but that means the entire tension or all of the friction and pressure of tightening the string is occurring right at this point. And maybe I could have sanded that down and smoothed it, but still, you're putting the entire of tension on a sharp edge. So even with the locking tuners I have, I tend to wrap the thing a couple of times, maybe just that far, and that gives me plenty of friction, plenty of contact surface around the shaft, and minimal slippage possibilities. You've still got to deal with slippage, friction at the bridge and at the nut, of course, but this eliminates as much as possible at this end. Now, Cluson style tuner is going to work very similarly. Take your end, but you put it down in, and the cloison is hollow. This is why this is a good demonstration of it. And then as you start tuning, as long as you maintain tension on the string at the top here, it'll want to slip a bit. But if you put a kink in it, not a heavy one so the string breaks, and then do your like 3 or 4 winds or wraps, the taper of the shaft is going to try and keep the string's going to maintain basically like this. It's going to keep a tight group. Plus your string is sort of got a break angle. It's coming down at an angle like this. So the string is pulling up on this edge of it. You can also bunch it with your fingernails or whatever. But once you put the string on like this and then stretch your strings out, this holds its tune really well, I find, particularly if you've got 3 or 4 winds, and they're nice and tight, and you always wind in one direction. Don't let one wrap go over, then under, then over, then under, because you get a big like knot, which won't work at all because there's gaps, and the gaps are what create room for the string to slip and move, particularly if they can, you know, like picture an old spool of yarn where or thread where it's going up and down and zigzagging over itself. There's tons of room for one wind to settle in between 2 other winds and create all sorts of problems. So anyway, and then the really handy thing about cloison tuners, when you're ready to take them off, you just loosen it off a bit and you just grab the thing and it slides right off the top. And I love that. Changing strings is brilliant because you just have a lot less to deal with. So now on to standard style tuners, which are the oldest in the group, and it's just your basic pin here, tuners down here, and the hole goes straight through. There's 2 ways of doing this, and one, well, there's the 3 if you count the oldest way, which is basically put your string in, same as with the cloison tuner, and just start winding. Oops, hold on there, pal. This does an okay job, and it has, it's time tested for sure. But the problem is there's still room for this thing to slip. You're dealing, or depending mostly on the friction of the winds around the shaft, but nothing's really holding on to this end. And then, of course, there's a bit of friction here, like with the wound strings. Certainly, they're going to sort of settle into a groove there, and that's kind of what's holding on quite a bit of those. But the E and B strings and G on a electric guitar aren't going to give you that. So the next option is you go through. Now your wind direction is like this. So here's your guitar body, goes around, and then your tuning head's here. So your wrap direction is like that. If you go backwards against the wrap direction, go under where you went in and just pull it up. Put a kink in the string right there. Then start winding. Wrap underneath, which is sort of the standard way that everybody does it. You then have this knot. And this is not a bad idea because it's going to grip onto the string here, particularly when you do enough of your string stretching and pull it through. The problem is you're going to have a gap right here under where the string goes. Plus, this can move. It can shift to the left or right or whatever. And that gap has room that it can close. Where these are wound over each other is kind of messy slightly, and there's room for these guys to slip. If this lays down a little more, that might create some room, or this string could go up, and then you've got a gap here you can see. So there's still room for this to get sloppy and kind of lose tuning stability. So here's the best way of wrapping guitar strings. Put your string through. You're done with this end of it. Hold it if you like, with pliers or whatever, but it really isn't necessary. Do one wrap by hand over, and then watch where it's going in. You have to go over it. Oh no, sorry, under it. Yeah. And then just stay under it. Now watch. You're going to go. Still get your nice tight bunching, but the wind that's above and below this free end is going to pinch on it and create extra friction. You also got good consistent contact all the way around the shaft, and the string is, other than this is the one spot where you're not going to get the string above and below wrapping tightly against itself, but the rest of the winds will, and this gap is going to be very consistent, and it can't shift anywhere. There's nowhere for it to go. So you're getting an extra bit of friction right here, and then as long as you've got decent tuning heads that aren't slipping, this is going to give you your best tuning result. And it's nice and clean on this side, which I really like. I like doing the low E string. Depends on the type of guitar you're dealing with, but I usually wrap under the previous wrap for each time it goes around. But the first wrap I'm going over. With the low E string, if you want to wind upwards to decrease the break angle at the nut, then you can reverse this process, put your string on, and then you put your first wrap on, but you have to go underneath this. And then as you start winding, make sure you go over, and then again over. And as long as you do that, then you're wrapping upwards the rest of the way. Of course, you're not going to do too many of these anyway, but this gives you higher and higher contact point, initial contact point with the tuning peg. You still get two strings pinching down on this spare end, and you get the reduced break angle for the low E. I usually only do that with the low E string, and not even all the time. Anyway, best way to change guitar strings. Please share this with your friends. Show this on your, I don't care, your Facebook or whatever, your retweets or whatever. But share this news out. This is the best way of doing it. And subscribe to my channel. It really helps me out a lot. And I've got more projects coming and more lessons to come as well. And, as always, thanks for watching.